One of the beautiful things about getting to work with Keith Mascoll on this Luminary Lens commission has been how much life he has brought to the room. So I'm struck by, in the museum, you have these objects that are many paintings or sculptures that are still and they're from the past. And then you have this other level of time almost being frozen, where you have the empty frame alluding to something that's gone or an action that happened, but it's very mysterious. And then you layer in Keith's piece, which is living right now, and it's this incredibly generous monologue that he opens himself up with this piece that he's written to help others with healing. And it's as if it's like you go from zoomed way out in history to zoomed a little bit further to the present and then even deeper inside of himself. And I feel like he's so giving in the work that he shares with the world, both through his artistic practice and then the way that he ties that to direct education and bringing along counseling services and things when he performs. I mean, it's very thought out and a beautiful way to bring it forward into community.
Hi, my name is Keith Mascoll, and I'm an actor in film and stage. So when I sat down to write my thoughts and ideas about the monologue, I had to really just take myself back to when I walked into the room and the frame spoke to me. It got me to think about how I feel empty sometimes. Being a survivor of sexual abuse, I started to think about how I'm an empty frame sometimes, or the fact that I have to rebuild myself, my self-confidence, redefine my manhood, and fill myself with my art. I felt like it was important to tell my story in that way, but also tell the story of other Black men and other folks in the African diaspora who have had things stolen from them, whether it's art, whether it's culture, and especially in museums, because there's a lot of art that has been stolen and portrayed as if it's one person's when it's not. Those are the things that spoke to me. The other thing as well is because there is a tiny representation of an African in the museum, I've also felt like it was important for myself as a Black male to put myself in the museum in some way.
When the theft happened, of course, these frames were, on the ground and ended up in the hands of the FBI, and they had to look for fingerprints, and then they needed to be restored because the theft had been quite violent. The paintings had been cut out, and in fact, there's that fabulous story of the self-portrait by Rembrandt, which survived because it was on wood paneling, and they hadn't expected that. They tried to cut it out and couldn't. Anyway, that's the old story. But eventually, the curator, who was in charge of the collection at the time, a few years later, when these frames had been released back into our custody, Hilliard T. Goldfarb, he decided to put the frames, with, of course, the agreement of the director, back on the wall. And it was a way of marking absence. It was also a way of reminding people what happened, and of protecting that space for the return of the paintings one day.
Thank you for answering that question, is why did they keep them up? And that's kind of, it's powerful, I think, because it says something about resiliency
and hope.
Right? The frame is still there to once again be filled.
My piece is called Empty Frames, AKA Emptiness, and it's a monologue about the empty feeling that I feel as an artist, but also as a survivor of abuse. My response piece is a monologue that I wrote with John Oluwole ADEkoje, a great filmmaker and a great writer. And we've been working on a different project together as part of the Triggered project called Triggered Life. And it's where I'm telling my story as a survivor of abuse, play another part as well, and that character represents for folks who haven't spoken and can't speak. I've been collaborating with John Oluwole ADEkoje. We worked together on a one-man piece called Love Jones that he had written, and we've been pretty much together ever since. Anytime that there's something that I have an idea about it, he's the only person that I call. It seemed like we were meant to be in the museum at that time, that I'm meant to be doing this project and talking about the emptiness, and that's what's fueled us. In the monologue, I'm talking about that feeling of loss, that feeling of having to rebuild myself, the feeling of having to create my own art for myself, and then learn about that and building confidence with who I am as a person, so then that I can live a confident life. And that's a journey. And it's not one that people talk about, and it's not one that Black and brown men talk about or have the space to be able to do that. And so I felt like it was an incredible opportunity, and really thankful to Rhea and to the Gardner for allowing me to talk about mental health and to talk about abuse through an art's lens. As a Black male, be able to tell my truth, but to be able to be in the frame is incredible. And it was important to make that statement that this is where we should be. It's about helping people. It's about giving people the courage to tell their truth and to use art to do that.
Who steals the painting and boldly leaves the frame behind, expecting the painter to hide in muted colors, hoping the artist will forget all the beautiful shapes and colors that were once there? And how does the painter find the courage to begin again, to fill the empty frame with something less horrifying? How do you hold that broken brush? How do you press against the cracked canvas? I truly want to find what was stolen from me. Empty cans are littered around me, reminding me of the smell of those many days of extraction. The spill corroded my body with their... You stole the truth from me and remixed it like a bounty killer rhythm that has my family dancing past the obvious. You made me something I'm not in their eyes. Mama, why do we both have empty picture frames? I know someone else stole your art too. I won't speak it until I see you again. I wish that I could reverse that waterfall for you. On my best days, I feel completely empty. My early art was stolen years ago, and I never reported it. I never talked about it and never intended to. I mean, what Black man in his right mind would? How am I going to fill this empty frame? How do you stop yourself from never-ending emptiness? I know my metaphors are screaming for plain language, but it's hard for a Black man of my generation to just cry old wounds into existence. Why do you keep trying to steal from me? You left me with nothing. My hands are tired of rebuilding broken canvases. The color gets duller with each rendition. The color of my innocence faded. But I still have to find a way to fill this empty frame. And I try. I believe it'll all go away. I believe it'll all go away by morning. I gotta believe it. I gotta believe it. I gotta believe there's a River Jordan for me, a place to lay my burden down. Every day, I get tired of facing it, but I'm one step ahead of the shadow. I call it a shadow because it takes light from me, changes my weather, changes me. I believe it will all go away by morning. I gotta believe it. I gotta believe it. I'm one step ahead, but every day is different. And sometimes I don't have the energy to keep running. I know I'm not supposed to run, but it's what I do. A black man's not supposed to have to deal with this. I get consumed by the shadow. I get consumed to the point where everything breaks down. And what I feel to be real, I feel like my manhood disappears.
One of the reasons I came to work here was when I came and saw the place the first time, I could see that there's so many different ways of responding to this building and to the collection.
Yes.
It's like there's multiple threads, as if it were a tapestry, and you can pull these different threads and find your own way, and
Right.
and which is incredible, because I mean, everything is fixed, but she didn't give you directions on how you would and how you would live it.
So many people have moved through that space over time, and it's changed, but the setting is the same.
I hope that that people can see themselves in the museum. I think that's important. I want people to be able to deal with self, talk with self. I think it's important to talk about trauma, and to talk about art, and to talk about emptiness, and to talk about sometimes the fuel that is behind why we do what we do as artists. As a survivor of childhood trauma and of sexual abuse, that it was never your fault, and that you can go from surviving to thriving, period.